3D Acrylic Rose tutorial. I do all my sculpting on a plastic lid, and here I've got a coloured bead of acrylic which I'm just shaping into the centre bud around which all my petals will be formed. Just make a cone shape. Just clean off the excess acrylic so I've got a clean surface to mould my petals. Grab a bead of acrylic, clean my brush, then I sort of shape it to a petal shape. I picked a mini rose from my garden and pulled it apart so I could see what shape to do the petals. But really anything fairly round will do. I'm now pressing it out so it's nice and flat. Then I lift all the edges of or at least the top edges of the petal from the plastic so it doesn't adhere. Then I place the centre bud that I made before in the centre and just press it in a little bit. Then using my brush I just lift the flat acrylic around the centre bud. I use my brush just to put a bit of a curl on the edge of the formed petal that I've just made, and make sure it's all nice and pressed in. Now, if the acrylic of the petal goes past the centre bud, I generally just cut it off. And then after that you just keep forming petals. Exactly the same way you did the first petal. When you place the bud on the flat piece of acrylic, just make sure that the edge of the new petal is sort of about halfway around the old petal, the first petal. Now I've got this going very fast forward because this actually took me an hour to make, and I didn't think anyone would want to sit and watch an hour of me trying to form petals. Now I frequently wipe my brush while I'm doing this so that it doesn't get acrylic stuck in it that will harden. Each time I add a new petal I just make sure that it bends outwards from the bud so it just gives you that nice edge of the petal. It takes quite a while to actually lift the petal off the plastic without damaging it. You have to be very, very delicate. And you can see I'm just pinching one of the petals out a little bit just to give it a bit more shape. That part's entirely personal. Depends on what sort of rose you want to do. Just keep building up the petals. Every time that the acrylic starts to get below the initial bud, I just cut it off. Just keep wrapping petals around it and pushing them out, sliding the tip of your brush between the old petal and the new petal just to get that position correct. The number of petals you do is really up to you. Depends. I generally just go until it looks like it's balanced. But you can leave it as a bud that's almost closed, or you can have it as a full-blown rose. Once it gets a bit wider, you have to be a bit careful when you put the rose down onto the new petal, because the folded back previous petal can actually cut through the acrylic, so you've just got to put the base of the rose more on the petal than having it flat. Once you've finished all the rose petals, then I use green and I pull it out into like a starfish. Once I've pulled it out, I just push back in and shape it into like little leaves coming from a central point. And that's going to be the bits of the initial bud, the little leaves that are at the base of the rose. Just push the rose onto the little leaves, and as much as I can I use the brush to push the little leaves up against the edge of the rose. Once the acrylic starts to set, before I get to the other little leaves, I use the manicure tool just to lift it, because otherwise I'll damage the brush. And I just push those little leaves up the side of the rose. Once I'm happy with that, I just lift the whole thing off the plastic and just check that it's all right. The little leaves, I tend to curl them outwards a little bit. As you can see, one there. And to make the leaves, the big leaves, I use the green with a bit of black. I dip into the green and then into the black. Draw it out into a petal shape, leaf shape, and just tidy up the edges while I'm waiting for it to start to set. Then I press it out just like I did with the petals, making sure to keep that leaf shape. Once it's pressed, I use the manicure tool just to do a central vein and the side veins on the leaf. And And again, I just use the tip of the brush to lift the leaf. You can see how small movements you have to make just to get underneath the leaf, otherwise you'll end up just pushing the acrylic back into itself. Once you're underneath, it becomes a little bit easier. It's just getting that initial edge up. You can see that leaf's starting to lift. Okay, once it's lifted, it's still malleable, so you can do some shaping. I generally give it a bit of a V shape and then curve the leaf. As you can see there's a leaf. I'll make 2 leaves on this particular rose. You can do as many leaves as you like. You can group them together. You can do stems. But as this is just a tutorial, I'll just show you 2 leaves. You do the same again. Now this one wouldn't stick of its own accord, so I just popped a little bead of acrylic to help adhere it to the rose. And that's the finished product. Which can be attached to a nail or a form. Thank you for watching my tutorial.